Welcome back. Today we are taking a look at the Axios Ironclad, which is from Axios, a brand new microbrand based out of Singapore. And Axios is actually co-founded by three enthusiast friends, one of whom may sound familiar, and that's Elshan, the owner of Zelos. Which is one of the reasons that there's been so much buzz about the Axios Ironclad, and also one of the reasons that you've seen this or another version of the Ironclad before, as they're now on the final leg of their successful Kickstarter. I'm a little late to the party on this one. But to say that it's a success is actually a vast understatement, as their original goal was just under $22,000, and they were fully funded in under 3 minutes. And I think right now they're sitting right around 190. So I think it's safe to say that there will definitely be another Axios in the future. I was actually supposed to review this a bit earlier, but just due to scheduling conflicts on both ends, they couldn't send me a prototype until just now. And I have to say that one of the reasons I was really interested in Axios was their attention to detail over the Ironclad collection. There are 5 watches in total, and there are enough changes in each to just create a very different feel with each watch. And I appreciate how they've given them names to match those personalities, with this green version representing the Northern Lights, or the Aurora Borealis. With the Ironclad, we're looking at a 40mm 3/16 stainless case, although it's about 43 with the crown. And the case here has been treated with a scratch-resistant coating, which I think is really important and other companies should also look at using. I believe it's similar to what is on the Traska Freediver, but the important thing is that it should help reduce the wear marks in the long run. The Ironclad has this really well-made solid feel to it, at 174 grams with its bracelet. The best way to describe the Ironclad's case, and in many ways the watch as a whole, is that its foundation seems to be that of a subby. Although one with stubbier lugs, as the lug-to-lug here is only 46mm, so I think that would help it wear just a little smaller than your typical 40. But the foundation is evident when you start to look at the individual components, from the case, the bracelet, and to the dial. But it's also evident that it's not a straight-up homage. And that's why I said it's foundation, as I think they took that and then further built upon it into their own style. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a safe and honestly smart bet for their first watch. And let's be honest, as much as we like to hear and learn about new original case designs, many people are just too hesitant to spend more than a few $100s to try one. So a subby-like case not only hits the sweet spot size-wise for a lot of people, but it's also a case that's very familiar and really safe ground for them as well. To that end, the sides are polished while the rest of it is brushed, including this very deeply embossed case back with an image of an ironclad ship. Now, normally I love this type of case back, and I do like it here. It's just a really cool idea and helps give the watch some personality. But here, I think it looks like it's missing something, that maybe there's just too much empty space surrounding the ship. And another negative I have is that the total thickness of the watch is a little tall at 14mm. But I think it's important to note that that's 14mm with that embossed case back and a really nice double-domed sapphire crystal. Plus, there is 500 meters of water resistance, so a thick watch is completely justified here. And that is to the very top of that crystal. If you measure from the case back to the top of the bezel, I think it's only sitting around 12.5. And really, those are my only complaints about the watch here. Otherwise, the Ironclad is a really solid offering. And I do appreciate the many fine little touches to the design, such as a signed screw-down crown with the Axios logo, and that logo is also prominently displayed on the dial. They say that the logo is supposed to be the tip of a sword, and I can kind of see that. But honestly, it also looks like a chevron from the show Stargate. And for me, as a sci-fi nut, that's not really a bad thing. Although others might think it's a little odd, but that's always how it goes with these design choices. Now, as you would expect, the bezel is 120 click and unidirectional, and it really does have a great action to it with no backplay. The bezel insert is ceramic, and like most ceramic inserts, it is a tad reflective. And there is one other really cool feature with this bezel, but you have to wait until the Lume shot to see it. The bezel color here is more of an army or maybe Kermit green, as opposed to the emerald sunburst green on the dial. And the sunburst effect is really just complemented by the reflectiveness of the metal outlines on the applied indicators. Now, looking at the dial as a whole, you can see that subby foundation here, especially in the chapter ring and the dot indicators. Where things start to differ, however, is at the indicators at the 3, 9, and 12, which I can only really describe as small ramps, as they all slope down to the center like a ramp. And you'll also notice that there's no metal border on that side of the indicators as well, which I think is a really cool design choice, as it just helps draw your eyes towards the center of the dial. You also have a date window at the 6, which combined with those ramps really makes a great symmetrical looking design. Not to mention that the date wheel on every Ironclad matches the color of the dial it's in, which is really just a nice touch, and it helps blend it into the overall design. Just above that date, you do have the water assistance, and it's in a red color matching the second hand, which is just a nice small splash of color to complement the green. Both the font of the text as well as the logo here are just sized right, as they're there when you look for it, but otherwise they just blend into the background. The hands are sword-shaped, and rather wide swords at that. Generally, they're a style that I really haven't seen before, and I think they did refer to them as being broadswords. Regardless, lengthwise I think they're perfect, and I think they're pretty cool looking to boot. Especially when it comes to the Lume. The Lume here in general is just fantastic in both design and execution, and I believe that they use X1 grade C3 Super Luminova as the primary Lume here, although in other versions they might use the blue BGW9. Although even here there is a touch of that blue lume on the bezel for the minute indicators, and that is the hidden feature that I think is really a cool touch. Now, since I knew this lume was going to be good, I skipped the regular 40-minute tests and just went to a 3-hour. And I decided to put it up against the Phoebus Wavemaster, a Seiko Turtle, and the new Zelos Bronze Swordfish. And in a comparison test like this, when the Seiko is the one to fade out first, you know you have some great lume. But out of those other three, I think the Ironclad actually hangs in there for the longest, but not by much. Regardless, I think it's easily some of the best lume out there. And the only thing I would do to improve it might be to put some lume on the logo, but that could just be me. Movement-wise, we have a Swiss Selitta SW200, which is really becoming more common these days as an alternative to ETA, especially because they don't want people playing with their toys as much. It's high beat, 40-hour power reserve, and has hacking and hand winding. And as for the bracelet, well, it's extremely well-made oyster-style bracelet with a fantastic milled push-button clasp. And that bracelet also has a scratch-resistant coating, so I think it'll last you a good long while. And as for how it wears, well, it wears like you'd expect for a subby light case. As I said, those cases really hit the sweet spot for a lot of people. So it wears great and just sits squarely on the wrist, which in large part is due to that lug-to-lug. Although if you do want to use other straps or other bracelets, there is not a lot of clearance between the spring bars and the case, so you will need some curved spring bars. And I had to use curved spring bars on not just the Nato, but also this 2-piece leather as well. And finally, let's talk price. Well, the bad news is that with the Kickstarter, all those early bird slots are now gone. So it's not quite as good a deal as it was. And for comparison, all you really have to do is look at the Zelos Mako or the Phoebus Great Wall. They're both 500-meter divers and with similar movements. So the regular Kickstarter price of $448 is still reasonable and okay. So the Axios Ironclad is a well-designed, solid offering. If you were to make a list of everything you would want in a watch, you'd find it all right here. And not only does it give you everything you want, but it'll also look good for years to come thanks to that protective coating. Plus, they were able to offer it for a reasonable price with this Kickstarter. So there's not really a whole lot else you have to ask for. If someone really did want to complain about something, I think it would have to be the design, and mostly because it's not original. And if you already own a subby or two, you may not be inclined to actually add another. But I think it is worth pointing out that this is not a straight-up homage. It's something in between. They took what works and added their own touches to make something that can really stand on its own. So in that regard, perhaps the Ironclad is like gourmet comfort food. It's not something exotic and new, something that's exciting to talk about, yet ultimately awkward to eat. Yet it's more like an old familiar favorite, one that's expertly prepared with just a small twist. But what do you think about the Axios Ironclad? Just let me know down below. As well as if you actually jumped on it, let me know what color you got. I'm always just curious. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for joining me.